Good afternoon, everyone. This is Erin Liu. I'm the mortgage agent from LendCity Mortgage, and today I'm the host of our podcast show, Wisdom, Lifestyle, and Money. And today we want to focus on talking about the immigration law and for the people who are interested in coming to Canada. And before we are getting into that, allow me to introduce my special guest today, and Miss Haj Al-Sayed. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you so much for coming, and I'm excited that we're gonna bring lots of valuable information to the audience.
I hope so.
Yeah, definitely. So before we get into the detail, I would like to know a little bit about yourself and how did you choose your career path and what drove you to become an immigration lawyer?
Well, actually, I went into law school not thinking I would do immigration at all. It was the last thing on my list of things to do. I come from an immigrant family, and coming from an immigrant family, your family and your family's family and friends, they always want to come to you and ask you for immigration advice, even though I wasn't an immigration lawyer at the time. So for me, I was like, I will not be an immigration lawyer. That is not what I want to do. But then I started practicing, and I did my articling. I did a little bit of immigration, criminal law, and real estate, and I realized I actually love it. So I ended up going in immigration and real estate.
That's good to know. So you were immigrant as well, like
I am.
So you came to Canada since you were.
I started university here. I lived in the US before, but with university, I moved to Canada and started my journey here.
Oh, nice. Good to know. Same here. I was an international student and then I settled down here now. So
Okay, yeah.
that's good. Yeah. So I do feel like studying in Canada is a way to help the people get a residency in Canada. So, because based on my experience, I was international student and I needed to apply the school here and I need to finish the IELTS test for sure. But for all the legal paperwork, like my high school in China, they took care of it. Do you mind if you can talk about a little
Yeah,
bit
for
about
sure.
that? How does it work to become an international student?
So, like you said, international student, it's one of the doors to come to Canada. And I would say it's one of the best doors. It opens many avenues for you later on to apply for permanent residence in Canada. So I do suggest it for a lot of clients, and especially younger ones who are looking to permanently stay in Canada. I would tell them, yes, apply as an international student, and that'll open many doors for you, which we can talk about later on. But generally speaking, to become an international student, you need to apply to the university or college that you want to get into and make sure it's an accredited one that will get recognized by Immigration Canada to be able to use that later on. So once you apply to them, you get accepted, you do your IELTS exam. These are the first steps in then applying to become an international student or a student visa.
Okay, student visa. I remember that. So,
Yeah.
I just would like to know based on your service, will you help on the study visa, or like would you help on applying the school as well, or it's like
So we don't do that aspect. We can guide the person to the guidance counselor or whoever they need to talk to at the university they're looking to get into, but we don't necessarily do that aspect itself. But once they do have an acceptance, then we take that and we apply for the study visa. We let them know all the different things that they need to do that would help their application become a strong application, and then we apply for them for a study permit.
Sounds good. That's good. Yeah, definitely. Having a professional lawyer to help you do all the paperwork, you won't make any mistake to delay the process or the visa release. Yeah.
I tell people you can probably do the application yourself. It's an application at the end of the day, but the role of a lawyer is that they know the process. They know what you need to add as extra things, the documents you need to add that would make it a more holistic application.
Yeah.
And would give you the best chance possible.
That's so true. I agree with you. Yeah. So after school, I graduate and, I know lots of, like for us being international students, what are the, like, are they able to like still stay in Canada after graduate?
After they graduate, yes. So once a person graduates, there is the postgraduate work permit, which they can apply to. And the postgraduate work permit, it's up to 3 years maximum. And I know right now with the COVID protocols, they have a policy for that where you can extend it for 18 more months maximum.
Perfect.
But at the same time, once you apply to the postgraduate work permit, depending on how long you've studied, that also gives you, you can gain work experience, and that helps you apply for permanent residence. So these are all different steps that open, again, once you apply for international student, they open the door for you to gain points, gain access, gain experience in order to apply later on for different programs in Canada.
Sounds good. And does the post-education, was that post-education?
Postgraduate work
Okay, sorry.
permit.
Does the postgraduate visa similar or same thing with the work visa?
It is. So it's a work permit. It's for graduate students from a university or college in Canada. And what it does is that you can work any job, essentially. So it's not a specific work permit where you have to work only a specific job, but you can pretty much work any job. So you have students who get, say, for example, a business degree. And after that business degree, then they apply for the postgraduate work permit. And once they get that, let's say they're a manager at Tim Hortons. With that work experience, it might be relevant or it might not be relevant to their degree. But with that work experience, it opens the doors for Canadian Experience Class, which is a federal program for permanent residency. It opens the door for different provincial programs in Ontario. So again, it opens the doors for you, and I can't stress that enough.
Oh yeah, definitely. So after graduate, like based on my own experience, I got married with my boyfriend, who is my husband right now. So the way I got the permanent residence is my husband sponsored me to get my PR card, and is there any other way they can get a PR like for the international student like me before and besides getting married and get sponsored by the
I love
husband?
special sponsorships. Yeah. I feel like a little bit of, I'm not Cupid, but I put the application together to put the best face forward.
Yeah.
But that's a side note. But for international students, you have federal programs like Express Entry, which is the most common one. A lot of people know about Express Entry, which has the Canadian Experience class within it. So with Canadian Experience, you don't need to have a Canadian education, but you need to have at least 1 year of work experience in Canada.
I've heard that, yeah.
But it does help to have studying in Canada. So that's one thing. But there's the provincial programs that for international students, for master students, graduate students, PhD students.
Higher level of education
Yes,
people.
but
Okay.
also just international students in general.
Okay.
There is programs for permanent residency that stem from being an international student and then having a job offer later on. Or after you graduate, you get a job offer, and that opens the door for permanent residency.
Right.
There was a program that opened in 2021. It was called the May 6 Policy
Okay.
program, and a lot of international students might remember that, but it was something that a policy put in place, and they asked for 30,000 to 45,000 students, international students, either they're international students just with a job offer, you didn't have to have work experience or anything like that, or your job was vital for Canadian economy. So like doctors, healthcare workers,
Professional
things like
field.
that.
Okay.
And in a matter of 24 hours, 45,000 or 30,000 of these spots were filled, and it was closed. So that's how fast these spots get filled, right? And it was such an amazing policy. We didn't know it was coming. They said it, they announced it a little bit beforehand. But things like that are opportunities that become accessible for people who do their studies here.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember I heard like during the COVID, the Canada really opened their door to welcome the newcomers, and they just opened the door and
They did a lot of exceptional policies,
Right.
and these policies helped ease a lot of the restrictions that were there before. So you had a lot of restrictions before for visitor visas. So for example, if someone is coming to visit their spouse, or they want to come visit their Canadian spouse,
Right.
there is restrictions on this. And a lot of times they'll get rejected because the officer will say, I don't believe you're returning back to your country. Whereas this person, I mean, it could be true. It's likely to be true. If
Yeah.
you're coming to visit your spouse, you're likely to stay with them or find a way to extend your visa.
Right.
So a lot of times they were rejected before COVID. But during COVID, they made exceptions, and a lot of spouses were able to come and visit and stay and have their applications processed from within Canada. So that was such a great thing for a lot of people. I know there was like these policies with students extending their work permits, extending their stay within Canada essentially in order to be able to work on the next step while inside Canada. So that also helped a lot.
So how does it look like right now? Is that still like they're more open, or like they get back to the restriction that they had before?
A little bit of this and a little bit of that. So with the visitor visas, I would say they went back to pre-COVID times. So it's not as easy anymore. With different policies, there have been different policies, like I mentioned earlier. For example, with the postgraduate study permit, where you have a chance to just extend it up to 18 months after it expires. Before that, there were no such exceptions. Once it expired, that's it. You cannot extend after that.
Unless you have a job over there, right?
If you have a job, then it moves on to something different. Now it's an LMIA work permit or a job-specific work permit. But the postgraduate work permit was done.
Yeah.
But with the COVID protocols and policies that came into place, they did allow for things like that. Or to be able to change your visitor visa into a job-specific work permit. So if you find a job and someone is able to give you a job offer, then you can switch that over. That was not there before.
Right, I see. Yeah, because I saw the Canada, they hosted like over 800,000 international students in 2022. And based on this number, like we have seen the number has been increasing since the past few years. How do you think of it? And do you think like what sectors it going to impact?
I mean, I definitely see a lot of students being accepted. A lot of people going into health.
Like
Health,
a nurse,
yeah.
Because of COVID, I think.
Possibly, or because they're always needed here in Canada.
Right.
I mean, Canada needs the people.
Right.
With Canada and the immigration system, there's a lot of faults, and it's very slow. And I'll tell you, the backlog is crazy just with dealing with it on behalf of clients. It's ridiculous. But at the same time, they have been looking to get more people in Canada and have been trying to open more programs. I always tell people, you always have better chances of finding something to become a permanent resident if you are in Canada, because programs will open for people in Canada more so than those outside. And they'll always try to seek programs for international students, workers, things to help them become permanent residents, more so than those who are outside Canada. So that's always something that'll help those in Canada to look forward to. But at the end of the day, just Canada needs people. It needs people to occupy jobs. There's a lot of industries that just need manpower. So all of these things, at the end of the day, they will have to find ways to open programs to people in order to come to Canada. And just those who are working in Canada right now. There's a lot of people working in Canada, and there are different pathways opening to them for permanent residency as well.
So my another question is, beside being an international student or the sponsorship, like what are the other, for the people who doesn't want to study but they have money, like do they have some special program they can like invest in business to become a permanent resident?
Yeah, I mean, there is investment business programs open in different provinces. Each province has their own qualifications, own restrictions, everything. I mean, it's different essentially for each province. But in Ontario, there is also programs for business investment visas, things like that are open for people with money who invest in a business or who buy a business or create a business structure that helps the economy of Canada at the end of the day. Now, I mean, they closed it when it comes to buying and investing in real estate, just because of how that has impacted that industry. But they have opened it, and it's been open for other kinds of industries and things like that to invest for something that will help the Canadian economy at the end of the day.
Speaking of the permanent residency, my husband got his Canadian citizenship. So I would like to know, how do you transition from permanent residence to the Canadian citizenship?
Okay, so to transition from that, there's a few different obligations that you have to meet. The first is the time period. So you have to have 1,096 days living in Canada, which is 3 years out of the past 5 years, to live in Canada in order to be eligible to apply for citizenship. Besides that, you have to have language, so English or French, and up to level 5. So if you took classes as a PR or anything like that, then it would have to be up to level 5. Now, there's exemptions from that, which I'll talk about after, but these are the main things. And then you have to have, obviously, police clearance, you filed your taxes living here, all the information that you have and collected in the past 5 years, they look at that. So these are the main requirements when it comes to applying for citizenship. Some people now haven't met that time period, and they've lived outside of Canada, so they wouldn't meet it. So even if they meet everything else, but they haven't met the time eligibility to be the 1,096 days within Canada, they will not meet that, and they'll have to actually meet the full time period in order to apply.
Gotcha. Is that the way they have to keep their PR card as well? You gotta live like 3 years out of 5 years to be able to.
For PR, it's actually less than that. It's just to maintain your PR, it's 730 days out of the past 5 years. Despite that, you'd be surprised how many people will come and they actually haven't lived the 730 days. And it doesn't have to be right after each other. It doesn't have to be collective.
It's accumulated.
Just exactly
Okay.
over the past 5 years. So some people will live outside of Canada. They'll come on vacation, and then, they won't maintain that time period, and then they'll try to fight it later on.
Are they able to do that?
Not always. If there was very convincing reasons of why, then perhaps when you appeal, they will listen to that. If you were with your Canadian spouse, living with your Canadian spouse outside of Canada, they had a government job or they had a job with a Canadian company, that would still count for you. So it wouldn't count against you, but not everyone has that, of course. So these are different things to look out for to make sure to maintain that time. At the very least, maintain your permanent residence status, your PR status while you have it.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Great information. And also, as we know, Canada aim to welcome 465,000 people, the newcomers, for the permanent residency. And how do you think of that as well?
I mean, it's great that there's initiatives like that. I know there has been an announcement regarding something like that. I haven't seen the concrete policies that will push for that exactly, but it's a positive step to have an announcement to say that we need this manpower, we need people immigrating to Canada, and we're gonna move or take steps towards that. I'm hoping to see more policy and more, something more concrete come into play.
Perfect. And also, is there any difference or common things to be a permanent resident and a Canadian citizen?
Yes. So with your permanent residence, it can always be revoked. So as a lawyer, I'll tell people your permanent residence, it's great that you got it, absolutely amazing, but also make sure, depending on how you got it, for example, if someone got their permanent residency as a refugee claimant and then they applied for their permanent residence as a protected person, they cannot go back to their country of origin or any country that they have been persecuted in.
Right.
Because doing that, they revoke their permanent residency. That's one. Any criminal charges or convictions. So not charges, but if charges become convictions, so criminal convictions that lead up to jail of 6 months or more, that can revoke your permanent residency. Things like that revoke your permanent residency, whereas if you're a citizen, that doesn't, criminal charges, criminal convictions, these things do not revoke your your citizenship. So this is, I would say, the most important difference between the two. One you can be revoked, the other cannot. And other than that, there is voting. One, obviously, as a citizen, you can vote. As a permanent resident, you cannot. And you have to maintain your time period in Canada, like I mentioned before, as a permanent resident, whereas as a citizen, once you become citizen, if you live outside of Canada, you do not lose your citizenship.
Okay, so I have an interesting question I would like to ask your opinions. We have the foreign buyer ban this year, and for the foreigners, they couldn't buy the real estate property up to 3 units. And do you think this ban will impact the immigrants coming to Canada? Will it slow down the newcomers? What's your thought?
I don't think so, because in essence, these foreign buyers who are buying these properties or investing in these properties are not the majority of buyers, but they have impacted in such a way, especially in different regions, whether Toronto, Vancouver, places like that. That's where the majority of buying is. But majority of foreigners coming to Canada have been either workers, students, spouses applying for PR programs, different investment programs even. So I don't think it would really stop immigrants from coming. Also at the same time, even the ban has some exceptions to it. So immigrants working in Canada can still buy. They still have to pay the 20%, but they can still buy. International students can buy. Protected persons, so people who had the refugee claim accepted, they can buy. As well as people who have spouses who are Canadian can buy. So these are all exceptions that are allowing. Essentially, they're just trying to ban investing in a property and kind of just leaving it and going. But it's still allowing those who are living in Canada as immigrants to buy properties.
That's true, yeah, because I have seen lots of international students or the people who has a work visa right now. They are trying to buy the house that they're gonna live in like right now or in the future, but it's good, like they don't get stuck here and they will still have ability to buy the property, which I think is a great news for them. Yeah. And here is my last question I would like to know, and since we're both immigrants, and why do you think Canada is a great place to come or immigrant?
Well, that's a big loaded question. I'd say beaver tails, first of all. But I mean, Canada has opportunities. It's many opportunities, and it needs the people here, right? It's not just that, but the people, everything that makes it. I mean, I lived in the States before this. I lived Michigan, North Carolina, Virginia. I've lived in Iowa, everywhere. But at the end of the day, when I moved to Windsor, and I know not a lot of people like Windsor, but I love Windsor actually.
I love Windsor too.
Me too. It's such a small town.
I love small
It's family
towns.
Oriented.
Yeah.
I love the coffee shops. You guys,
oh yeah,
so
which
many
one
coffee
like?
shops. Well, there's a new coffee shop called Yemeni Corner. I love that place. Coffee Exchange was like my original. Tallulah, like there's so many, but it's it's so vast and so different. The landscape is different from here to Toronto to Vancouver to Quebec. Like there is so many places that I hope to visit all one day. I haven't had the ability to visit all of them yet, but there is so many places that are vastly different. There is so many opportunities, things like that. Now, I hope I can see the policy come into place where it allows more people to come in. I know, it's been announced, and I'm hoping to see the groundwork for that.
I'm excited for that too.
Yeah.
I think that's all for today, and thank you so much for coming, and it's really educational and informative today for today's podcast, and
it's my pleasure, Erin.
No problem. Thank you for your time again.